you. Well, let's come to you, Father Limuko. I know that yesterday was a really emotional day for a lot of Catholics around the world. I have checked to find out if this is the fastest conclave. It turns out that no, it's not the fastest conclave. They said the fastest conclave happened under 10 hours. You know, when I'm trying to remember the name of the Pope now, when he emerged. But this is one of the shortest. They say it continues a trend of short conclaves that we have witnessed in recent times. It is I don't know whether it's a blessing that I have witnessed, you know, this number of conclaves in recent times, because what it means is that one pope is dying and another pope
three
is...
conclaves in our lifetime.
In our lifetime. Remarkable. But, you know, how was it waiting for the emergence of a new pope, waiting for the cardinals to come to a decision?
Yeah, this was actually one of the shortest conclaves in recent times. Really, I thought it would last a week or so.
That's what you had imagined, right?
Yes, I imagined it last at least a week. But it was so short that when someone called me yesterday, say, "Oh, there's a white smoke," I said, "No." I mean, I didn't expect it.
Like, how possible
in 2
is
days,
that?
you know. But it's a good sign. It means the cardinals went in fairly convinced of what direction to go. This could have lasted for 5 days, 7 days, 9 days. But I think they must have thought well. And you know, there is a saying in Rome that whoever goes into the conclave as a pope comes out as a cardinal.
Oh.
Yeah, very powerful expression in Rome.
In other words, if you hold an ambition that you're going to be pope, you might just come out.
Yeah. Or all those we are hoping will be pope
will not.
You know, all the candidates we have in mind. So we had a number of them, including the Secretary of State, including Cardinal Tagle and others this man must be pope. He comes out as a cardinal. And we didn't expect the Augustinian because his name never popped up anywhere, you know.
So it was a dark horse.
Yes, indeed, you know. But it's wonderful because this man has great experience. Born in Chicago, worked as a priest in the United States, but it's a missionary. Therefore, had experience in other parts of the world, including Latin America, where he learned the Spanish language and can express himself very well in Spanish.
Which he spoke
yesterday, very fluently. And then he went from there, having been made bishop there. Pope Francis invited him to work with him in Rome. And in Rome, because he studied in Rome, he speaks very good Italian. So he spoke again very fluent Italian. And you need to have that as a pope in Rome, because your first constituency is Rome, because you're the bishop of Rome, first and foremost, before you are the pope of the world. And then he's English, he has English language. So one of the conditions for a pope usually is that he is communicative. He has the capacity to express himself well. And we saw that yesterday, among other things. Then he worked in the Vatican. That means that he has a good grasp of the administration of the Vatican, because you need that as well to be able to find out who you need to live for a while in the dicasteries, in the various ministries of the Vatican, whom you want to move out, so you can move forward with your plan and your vision. So that is another great reason for electing him. But apparently, it appears as if many of the bishops, many of the cardinals, were already conscious of this. And so that's why that conclave lasted so shortly.
I wanted to be able to get your thoughts on some of the things that happened yesterday when Pope Leo was elected.
Yes.
One of the things everyone talks about, of course, is the fact that he is American.
Yes.
And then he did something on that balcony. He didn't speak a word of English. He spoke Latin, he spoke Spanish, and he spoke Italian. But they didn't speak a word of English, and he's American.
Yes.
So that has, you know, of course, had ripple effects with people asking, you know, why did he do that? Is there a message in that for the 1.4 billion Catholics around the world? Do you think that he was sending a subtle message to everyone?
Or perhaps to his Americans.
Or to his Americans.
Who are trying to make this about them.
About them, exactly. do you think that was what was going on?
Well, this is a very important question you're asking now, because actually we're saying we want an African Pope. People said, oh, we want an African Pope. Some said, oh, we want an Asian Pope. You know, actually the Pope is the leader of the church. So he does not want to make himself, if he was African, make himself look as if, okay, here I am, the African Pope. And he's saying to the American people, and of course the English people, I speak English, you know, but I'm not an English Pope.
I am not an American Pope.
I'm not an American Pope, you know. You know, and the language generally of the Pope, especially as expressed in Rome, would be Italian.
Indeed.
You know, so he spoke fluent, very fluent Italian.
Yes,
that was very impressive.
Okay.
I speak Italian too, so when I heard his Italian, I was quite impressed. And I think that he's going to have a very warm welcome in Italy, in Rome. That is very important. And then, of course, when it comes to Nigeria, he will speak English. We'll be happy with him.
I mean, one of the things that I wanted to be able to get your thoughts on is something that we heard Father Eugene talk about.
Yes.
So the fanfare
Yeah.
will soon be over. We need to get back to the work of uniting this church.
That's right.
Which is why many people say this particular cardinal was picked to be Pope. And very symbolic, really, thinking about where he's coming from, a very divided country, as it were. So let's talk a little bit about the job ahead for Pope Leo XIV as he starts his papacy. Many people have called him a moderate. Many people say he's also very liberal. He's a reformer. He's an Augustinian. What are some of the things that he has to look at immediately as he starts this job?
I think he outlined that yesterday in the speech he made.
Pardon us, we don't speak Italian.
That's right. That's right. So let it into it. And he said we have to be una chiesa missionaria. It means we need to be a missionary church.
Okay.
You know, that's number one. And then he said, we need to unite. That same word you use, we need to unite ourselves as a church, to work together as a church. He said, we have to work together, united. And he used the word synodality, the word that Pope Francis promoted a lot, that the church has to work together as a synodal church. And therefore, I think these are some points that he is going to emphasize on in his pontificate, that we are a missionary church, that we're a united church, and that we should be a synodal church.
He has a press briefing on Monday.
That's right. We'll hear more. I'm sure.
Well, we certainly will be looking forward to that. Just to quickly note that I think Pope Julius II, they said, was the fastest elected pope. His election was done in 10 hours, in less than 24 hours. But let's come back to some of the things that you have already enumerated with the emergence of the new pope and what we can look forward to. When you talk about the missionary church, what does that mean?
Well, it means that the church has to continue its work of evangelizing and making Christ known to people all over the world. That is a very important task. At the moment, the Catholic Church has 1.4 members.
1.4 billion.
1.4 billion members.
Who has done the counting, by the way?
Pardon?
We
Who has done the counting?
Well, they do every year.
Yeah,
because every year the dioceses send their returns of their membership to Rome. How many people did we have last year? How many people have died?
Baptized,
how many were baptized?
And
so on and so forth. So every year there's an annuario. It's a whole book of every diocese in the world, where when you finish that annuario, then you calculate all the numbers and you know exactly how many Catholics there are. So that's how the numbers are known.
Yeah, sorry, I distracted you from making the point about being a missionary church.
That's right. So being a missionary church means that we go back to evangelizing, and there's a lot more to do to evangelize. There's a lot of the world that is not covered. And we Catholics know that when we evangelize people who come to know Christ, others come to poach from the Catholic Church. You know, but there's a lot of untouched grounds, of green areas that need to be worked on. There are people who have never heard the word of Christ.
I am actually quite excited in the sense that this Pope understands, you know, he understands the church in different aspects. He understands the church in the developed world, which is where he originally comes from. He understands the church in South America, which has a huge population of Catholics. He understands the church in Africa. He understands the church in the developing world, so to speak. So I'm really excited for what this portends for the Catholic Church moving forward.
This is exactly the point that he makes about the missionary church, because he thinks that there is a lot more to be done, to have more missionaries. He himself, you talked about his visits to Nigeria earlier. They were actually to meet his confreres, his brother Augustinians, who actually, I'm also a son of the Augustinians. Yesterday he said, in that speech, he said, I am a son of St. Augustine, who said, for you, I am a bishop, but with you, I'm a Christian. A very important phrase he made yesterday. St. Augustine, of whose congregation he belongs, St. Augustine was a powerful African. Yes, was
of Hippo.
Yeah, of Hippo, very powerful African bishop, who used to say, for you, or with you, I'm a Christian, but for you, I'm a bishop. I'm a bishop, but with you, I am the same thing, you know, with you as a Christian. For you, I am a bishop. With you, I am a Christian, you know. And so he knows the need for continuous evangelization. And he knows that right now, the church in Africa is growing by leaps and bounds. Even the priests coming out of the African church are by far more than anywhere in the world. This is also a record in the Annuario, which we mentioned earlier. So I think he's going to take the African church seriously. And it would be a pity, really, if any pope today did not take the church in Africa seriously, because we are the fastest growing church in the world. Again, from the records of the Annuario, of the Vatican Annuario.
Interesting.
Yes.
But right now we're actually also in a very delicate place. We've seen how, you know, tenets are changing. I think one of the things that Pope Francis quoted a bit of controversy when he said that, you know, was it gays could be blessed in church, even though yeah, well, I would like him to clarify. All I heard was blessed. I'd like him to clarify.
Blessing them individually, or is it blessing the union?
You know, that he was talking about. So those are two different things.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this is the current reality of the world that we live in. Be you living in Africa, be you living in Europe, be you living in America, these are new realities that the church is confronted with. How do you think that the Catholic Church will continue to navigate these new developments, shall I say?
Well, this is a pontificate that needs someone who has his 2 feet on the ground. I think that is what this Pope Leo has, from all that we hear of and what we know of him so far. There is a cardinal who spoke during these preparations to the conclave, and it was one of those, you know, speeches that made us feel very sad, because he said, well, there are people who are clamoring for an African pope in Europe and in America, but he said those who are clamoring for an African pope want the church to go backwards to a conservative church, because no African pope will allow LGBTQ, you know, for example, and so on and so forth. That was quite a sad thing to hear. Yeah, to have been said. But you know, this is an area which is very contentious, and I think that even Pope Francis himself, having said what he said about blessing these gays and lesbians, did not go further to approve what he seemed to have said. And then, of course, his aides began to say, well, what he meant was that if someone comes to you and asks for blessing, will you not bless him? That if someone met you on the road and asked you to bless him, won't you bless him? But he did not mean sacramental blessing. So we take it that he did not mean sacramental blessing. Otherwise, that would have caused quite a row in the church. The new Pope has to be fairly more articulate about what he teaches and more firm. The church is 2,000 years old, and you know, we have not wavered in any way. And the Pope, who is by far more liberal, creates a problem for the church. So that word that our brother used was very instructive. He's going to be a moderate Pope. I think he will succeed if he's a moderate Pope.
It was very interesting today because it's not just the LGBTQIA plus situation.
Yes.
There's also the situation of women.
Yes.
That has also been a conversation. There's also, very instructive what you said. They're pretty disappointing. The idea that, you know, an African Pope will not be able to understand world dynamics and be able to do things like that because of where he's coming from. But we have Pope Leo with us right now.
That's right.
As he goes in, moderate, everyone says he's going to be, but he's also a reformer. He kept talking about evangelizing, and you've talked a little bit about that. With inclusivity, opening up our doors to bring in more people, so people don't feel like we're such a regimented church. People don't want to be involved in something that will be, you know, very regimented. Being a moderate and a reformer as well, how do you think the Catholic Church can open up more to get more people to see this beautiful thing that Catholics love so much?
Well, one thing that Pope Francis did, which was applauded, was the fact that he tried to bring in more lay people into the leadership of the church in Rome. So, and then he brought in women too. I don't think that a lot has been spoken about this, but he brought in Reverend Sisters and gave them, one became the head of a ministry for the first time in the history of the church. And then he raised another and a few others to higher levels. He did that. That's the head of communications of the dicastery of the Ministry of Communications in the Vatican is actually Dr. Rufino. I think Paolo Rufino is a lay person. That office used to be handled by an archbishop who would be prefect of the congregation. But they brought a lay person in to handle that position. So I think that Pope Leo will continue in that direction. I think that is going to open up, you know, spaces for more lay people and also for women to play their role. And the Vatican is actually emphasizing now that if there are things that don't need to be done by the priest, by the ordained priest, then you don't have to get a priest in there. Social communications, for example, is not necessarily an area for priests, and therefore the lay people can handle it, and so on and so forth. So this is where the church is heading right now.
Well, to be very honest, Father, I have to say that there's a lot to look forward to with the new Pope. I'm sure that the Catholic Church is still basking in the excitement of the emergence of the new Pope. How long do you think this honeymoon period will last? Just a little. I want to go back to it.
You know, yesterday that the pictures of St. Peter's Basilica, you know, there was so much joy all over. But I kept looking at that picture, and I found on the first line where there were priests and others, you know, with their Roman collar shirts, clapping, there was a young priest there, some priest there, who never clapped. If you look back at the picture, I'm saying, oh, what's happening? Man, clap for this new pope. You know, I think it's going to go on for a while, but not everybody will clap. And,
because some people's hopes were dashed.
Yeah, some people's hopes
Maybe he was Filipino.
Naturally.
Because yesterday a lot of people were rooting for the Filipino cardinal.
That's right, exactly, you know, and all that. The Filipino cardinal, who was actually met cardinal the same day with Cardinal Onayekon.
Oh, wow.
Many people thought he was going to be pope. I also thought of him. Actually, when he was named cardinal with Onayekon, I was on a sabbatical in Rome. So I organized a press conference for the cardinal, our cardinal. Let me tell you what happened. On the day after the press conference, it was when they were made cardinals and giving the hat and the robes. Cardinal Onayekon was on on the front page of 3/4 of Italian newspapers.
Wow.
Yeah, well, he told me when he met his own brother brother cardinals later, they said, well, Cardinal, where are you coming from? We've been here for many years and we never got the front page of a newspaper.
It's good to know.
On your first day. That's right.
It's making the front pages of most of the dailies this morning, also in Nigeria.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, you know, so Cardinal Tagle was well accepted from the beginning, and many people thought, and the Pope had said to him at some meeting in the Philippines that you have my spirit. You know, you are very much like me.
So they thought he was receiving the mantle.
Exactly.
Well, that did not happen.
That didn't happen.
Well,
yes.
I guess, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, unity is the message. And I think that even much as, you know, we continue to look forward to the day when an African Pope will emerge. You don't know what year that will be, but I think we can take the fact that this Pope knows us. He's been a part of us. He's been to our country. I mean, we heard from Father Eugenia, he's been here at least 6 times.
That's right.
He understands the church, and he is from the order of St. Augustine, who is a saint of Africa. I think that Africans can live with that, and we'll take that.
May I point out that there have been 3 African popes in history.
Oh, they have?
They have been. So when the African Synod met in 1995, Pope John Paul II, in his address to all the synodal fathers, read out the names of the 3 African popes who had been there. They were not black, but they were Africans.
I think that's what we're looking for.
You want
That's
black,
right.
or black African
Yes. From the sub-Saharan part of
Nigeria, you know, we want West Africa.
But we'll take what we have.
Yeah,
so,
right.
yes, blessings be upon Pope Leo XIV. We certainly wish him a very successful reign in his papacy. But we have to thank you very much for coming on our program this morning, Father Limuko, and shedding so much light on the emergence of Pope Leo XIV and what we can look forward to. You wanted to say something?
Thank you very much. It's a very exciting moment. You know, we're living this moment of a honeymoon, and we're all joyful. I think we're going to have a good Pope in Leo XIV.
Indeed, and that's what we pray for. So we have been speaking with Reverend Father Patrick Alumuku, who is the Director of Communications at the Catholic Archdiocese in Abuja. Thank you once more for coming, Father.
Thank you so much.